Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to session 2 of this conference, where today we're going to be looking at the roles of universities in achieving the net zero transition. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce the moderator for this session, Santa Ono, who's the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of British Columbia and is the President of University Climate Change Coalition. And Santa is joined by 4 really excellent speakers who he's going to introduce to you. And I commend this session to you, and I'll see you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Santa Ono. I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of British Columbia in Canada, in Vancouver. And I'm speaking to you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. I would like to thank the organizers of this important event, CSER, the International Sustainable Campus Network, the University of Strathclyde, and Science Europe. It's my honor to moderate this session with my distinguished colleagues, William Lee, Vice Rector for Scientific Research at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, Mamoti Pakang, Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, affectionately called UCT, Michael Ausling, Deputy President of KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and Wei Shi, President of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. To help frame my discussion today, I would like to offer a few reflections of my own on the role of universities in the net zero transition. I believe that universities have a unique civic and social responsibility as global actors to convene power to address the pressing needs of our planet, including the climate emergency and the imperative of a transition to net zero. The University of British Columbia is mobilizing education, research, and innovation to tackle global challenges and to create and leverage research for social impact and to co-create community solutions. Using a climate justice framework highlights opportunities for universities to integrate their operational climate action plans and policies with greater education, research, and community engagement to address the impacts of climate change on marginalized communities. We must provide students with the ability to be adaptable and to apply transferable skills in new contexts through excellence in transformative teaching, mentoring, and advising. The climate crisis is a top issue for UBC students, many of whom say they're experiencing profound anxiety about their futures. The future of higher education must include experiential education to prepare students to be creative, resilient, and collaborative agents of change. Addressing complex challenges facing humanity, such as those out in the laid out in the UN SDGs, requires multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder collaborations, leveraging expertise across the university and engaging with networks of a wide range of partners focused on the same mission. As campus sustainability programs become more sophisticated, there's an increasing need to share experiences, to measure achievements, and report on performance. UBC's leadership of the University Climate Change Coalition, or UC3, in North America, and the International Sustainable Campus Network, ISCN, are just 2 examples of important international collaboration opportunities for our universities. We want to actively seek more opportunities to collaborate locally and internationally to address this climate crisis and the intersecting issues of systemic racism, rising inequality, and the effects of this pandemic. And now it's my pleasure to ask our panelists to speak. As you know, they have prepared short videos to which you should have received links, and perhaps you've already watched them. If you haven't had a chance to watch the videos yet, I encourage you to do so during the break. So without further ado, let us now hear from our expert panelists, starting with William Lee, and then Michael Ausling, followed by Mamoti Pa Kang and Wei Shi, in that order. Thank you. William.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers as well and my colleagues for sharing this time to discuss some of these issues. Just to start off on some of the topics that are relevant to this discussion, I think one of the, and I think Santayana has just set the stage very well for a general picture of how universities can participate and assist and be players in these topics. And I think one of the key issues for many of the underlying topics to have a positive impact is in having moving to project-based research and solutions, and very closely related to community-based definition of the critical problems, without losing a very sound base which needs to go on in fundamental research in the basic aspects and disciplinary aspects, but linking them in a multidisciplinary focus. And I'd just like to start off with a couple of examples that have little to do one with the other, but which I think are important in setting the stage for this in terms of need and opportunity for large research and educational institutions. One is directly linked to the conditions of rural Mexico, and is a very old problem, and it relates to the air quality in homes in rural settings where cooking stoves are widely used. And this is a problem that deals with aerosol contaminant dispersion, respiratory disease, efficient combustion, fuel availability, and social aspects of how families and communities relate. Because, as you can imagine, it is an issue that is particularly relevant for women and children more than men, because they spend more time indoors. And this is a topic that has been worked at UNAM for a number of years now, particularly in the campus in the state of Michoacán, where we have a sustainability and ecological research institute, where a core group of engineers is working on this topic, and they have made great progress, but a lot of it is directly related, and the only way you can get it into people's homes is to be there with them while the project is being developed and as they are participating in the definition of what needs to be done. And so this is a multidisciplinary issue, clearly, in terms of the knowledge that is required to address the problem. And the consequences are far-reaching in terms of not only direct ecological and ambient impacts, but also in terms of how society is working and how the people's health is bettered by these solutions and everything else that comes with it. The second ingredient is the nationwide presence of a single institution. UNAM is unique in that it is distributed as a single university across the country, from Baja California to Yucatan, in different schools, institutes, centers, and campi. And so a wide strategy that is centrally decided or implemented, if you will, but with local versions of implementation, I think can have a deep impact in various ways. The ecosystems, social and environmental, are obviously very different in each of these sets. And I think that a necessary ingredient for the success of this process is fostering and promoting acceptance within academia of results, science-based results, as valid products and research, as opposed to papers and meetings, when conducting peer-reviewed evaluation for hiring, promotion, and tenure. And this is a particularly important issue in countries and communities of a relatively reduced size and or less tradition in developing countries. And this is, I think, what applies to Mexico. Finally, for this round, I'd just like to to state that there is common ground with many of the SDGs in terms of agendas and groups, and the conducting thread should not be limited to zero net transition, but is a wider spread of biodiversity, water, soil, food, air pollution, deforestation, and human rights, and especially, as I started with my first example, women's rights. So I'd like to stop right here and let my colleagues give their opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. And now, Michael.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for organizing this session. It's a great honor to be able to address these important sustainability issues that we are discussing today. And just from the previous film I made, I can also allude to some of those issues that we are working with. KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, is the oldest and biggest technical university of Sweden, and we are very focused on sustainable development, as we are on equality, internationalization, and digitalization. So I think we're trying to live all these pillars in everyday life. We're trying to include it, especially we are including sustainable ideas in all the programs that we are conducting. And I think that is a great takeaway for all the students we have. Fairly international crowd of students on Master of Science level, and of course all the PhD levels students are having a fair deal of understanding sustainable development in many different aspects. Whether it's energy production or consumption, if it's build society or whatever it is, it should be included in all the courses and the thesis works that we are doing. Not to be too long in this statement, we are trying also to reach out. We have a fairly big program on strategic collaboration with society, with industry and public sector. Of course, sustainable development is one of the key discussion points there. And we have a fair bit of initiatives together with all the partners. For example, we are running a big program in Sweden coordinated by KTH called Viable Cities, where we actually include 23 cities or municipalities all over Sweden. 23 of them constitutes about 40% of the whole population of Sweden, where all these different municipalities are doing quite remarkable initiatives to minimize and try to get to the net zero emission. And I'm very proud to be part of that board. Other things that we are doing is also to see how can housing be so much better accommodating to the net zero emission, or even make it a plus house. We have projects here called Live and Lab that produces understanding about how to organize, for example, student housing. And that project has now resulted in that 6,000 new apartments are being built in the greater Stockholm area with findings from this project, how to minimize, how to maximize the experience in student housing. And also a final example is how we live ourselves on campus to set up very new thinking in lecture halls, and how to also expose students to practical issues with new thinking in lecture halls. So I think we are trying to live as we learn. So we have two parts: the research itself. We find new ways to improve the society, but we also live as we try to learn. And I think I'm happy to be part of this panel to further discuss what we can do from the university point of view to enrich the society in sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, Mamohiti.
Thank you very much, Santa. And thank you for the kind invitation to participate in this very important conversation with university leaders from other parts of the world. Like all of you, I believe that universities have a very big role to play in this transition, net zero transition, not just in the formal education and research that we do around the topic, but also through the campus life and general student experience. And of course, we as African universities find ourselves in a developing country that is hardest hit by climate change, where the poorest communities are already experiencing some of the worst effects from a warming climate because of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And as universities, it's therefore important that we take a leading role in developing knowledge and graduates that will transform the continent and the planet to one in which the climate is stabilized to a point that will allow our communities and planet to thrive for generations to come. And of course, the big part of that is in fact convincing everyone around us, even those who are not yet experiencing these effects, that this is an urgent matter, not just other matters that have to do with poverty in our context. We at the University of Cape Town have for many years been committed to this cause with researchers contributing in different ways to global, national, and local policy and action, whether it be for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, South Africa's own climate change strategy and national contributions, or even closer to home in terms of the City of Cape Town's response to climate change. The university has several leading research institutes undertaking such work, including the African Climate and Development Initiative, the African Center for Cities, and the Energy Systems Research Group, to name a few. There's quite a range of research entities that focus on this matter from different perspectives. While we have focused firmly on leading teaching and research for many years, we are not neglecting our own campus operations and governance when it comes to climate change. We have in our environmental sustainability strategy of 2020 committed to the goal of becoming a net zero carbon campus by 2050 or sooner. And this is in line with Paris targets. And we are also actively working on things such as our endowment, responsible investment policy that is recommending divestments from any fossil fuel related investments by 2030 or sooner. We're taking it through our council in December for their meeting to approve so that we can get on with the program. This year, we launched a very significant 5-year sustainable campus project called Kusela Ikamva, which means secure our future. And that project seeks to merge research, teaching, and operational activities in one project. And it will see several initiatives implemented on campus as a proof of concept and living labs that any student can experience firsthand. We also making sure with that project that we bring together students as well as our workers in our gardens, in our residences, in our cleaning services, in our admin services, as well as in the academic sector, to work together on this project so that we can co-own not only in what we pronounce, but in what we do, this commitment to net zero transition. These are just a few examples of how we are taking an integrated approach to climate change at UCT. Whilst these individual achievements of the university may seem significant, we can only achieve global climate change objectives by working together with other universities on the continent and around the world. And that's why this session is more important for us. Of course, we also want to work with other civil society organizations and we work with other NGOs around Cape Town and the country to make sure that we make a collective contribution. So we are here to connect, we want to collaborate, we want to create for the benefit of our climate and communities. Thank you very much for including us.
Thank you, Momohete. And now, Wei Shi.
Thank you, colleagues. It's my privilege and honor to offer my view on behalf of HKUC's colleagues. There's nothing more to say in terms of importance of this particular topic. And I certainly agree that we, from the university angle, must not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk. We understand that the issues are extremely complicated. You know, yesterday in our local news report, there was quite a bit of reaction, I would say, when the news broke that many heads of state went to Glasgow on private jet when they went there to discuss the climate issue. So this just shows how difficult it is to balance the act, because there are security, safety concerns, health concerns, but also there is symbolic value in terms of how to handle this. I also would like to say that I have seen many media reports, for example, like this one just a week ago from The Economist, and as usual, the headline is striking. So what I would like to suggest is we need to be grounded and to take some real serious action so we can hopefully help self-setting examples. So in that regard, I would like to offer some quick summary in terms of what we at HKUST have been doing. Started in 2018, we decided that we would launch a sustainable smart campus as a living lab initiative. And in 2019, we put everything in action, committing about roughly $7 million US dollars of our own budget. Okay, this is not really a large sum of money. However, it's from our own regular budget. And the purpose is to encourage all members of our universities, students, faculty, staff, to put their creativity to work. And we are asking no more than what kind of new ideas can be conventional, doesn't have to be fancy, that we can put forth for HKUST to start to experiment to address the sustainability issue in truthful terms. And we use our own campus as a playground or sandbox to check whether the ideas are sound or not. We have held numerous open forums, solicitation, pitching, and then committee-based decision making, then followed by actual resource to support it. And our ideas are not all proposals will work out, but failures are at least as valuable as success. And if we fail, we learn how to improve. If we succeed, we like to expand, scale up. First, to see whether Hong Kong city with 7.5 million people can realize what we have been doing here on our campus. If yes, then we certainly have more opportunities to try to promote and realize similar ideas in our surrounding area, certainly in mainland China to begin with, and hopefully beyond. That's one of the examples. As a case in point, we have installed the largest number of solar panels in Hong Kong's history so far, in collaboration with the private enterprise. So now our campus is very much filled on many of the rooftops, including my own residence, to see that we can use renewable energy to supplement the power consumption needs. And if there's any surplus because of the cycle and the fluctuation. We are part of the Hong Kong's power grid, so that can be used by others. So this is one of the examples I'd like to share. The second thing is we are in the process of introducing sustainability as a key element for all undergraduate education. And a cornerstone of that is to see that not only we talk in conceptual terms, but we want to equip our students with the necessary analytic and maybe simulating tools so we can address situation in the totality sense. Namely, it's not only whether we are green on our own campus or not, but whatever we do, whether we can truly realize from the life cycle analysis viewpoint, upstream, downstream, and the supply chain evaluation, and whether we can truly be part of the circular economy. So after certain green energy devices have exhausted their life expectancy, what has happened afterwards will be duly accounted for as well. And the other thing is, we firmly believe this is not only a technical matter. Technology and science alone cannot solve the problem. Even though we are called Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, we plead to work together with government, with NGO and enterprise to address ranging from the policy angle to the actual implication matters, then to the specific technology. And hopefully, with that, our students, when they graduate, they can truly be equipped with a sense, not only with responsibility, but also in terms of how we should view this entire challenge in a more holistic manner. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wei-Shi, and thanks to all of our panelists. Your examples give us much food for thought on how universities can better contribute to net zero transition at the regional level, as well as how we can collaborate with academic and non-academic partners. And now let's have a little bit of a discussion. I'll start by asking each of you the same question, and then just go through the entire panel to hear your diversity of thoughts. The first one is this, and we'll start with William. Given that the role of universities in the 21st century is evolving, what are the most significant changes you're seeing or are needed for universities to achieve net zero? William?
Sorry, had my mic was off. Well, I think that this needs to be said more, not just for universities achieving net zero, but promoting it in terms of ingraining it, as some of us already mentioned, in society from a very early stage. I think one of the consequences of the pandemic has been obviously to get us out of classrooms, and that is unfortunate, to say the least. But another one has been to widen, in a way, the audience that can be reached through some of our university's actions. And I think this is an unprecedented opportunity for a different kind of outreach, if you will, that we have usually done in terms of public presentations or public events where we fostered proximity to the public to transmit X or Y result or initiative. And the tools and the methodologies that have been imposed on us because of remote teaching and so on, I think can be a very powerful tool to transmit some of these topics. And some of this will go away as we go back to classrooms, obviously, but we need to be very smart about which topics we keep for the future in order to take advantage of this opportunity. So that's one, say, non-traditional topic that is forced on us by circumstance, but we would be unwise not to take advantage of it at the moment. I'll stop there. Let my colleagues chime in.
Thank you, William. Michael?
Well, I agree very much to what you said. And of course, I think also we need to learn from the pandemics that we need to be flexible. We need to use the classrooms, use the physical locations, but also use the video or whatever media we will use in the future. I think we need to be thinking freely here and not to be too afraid of changing behavior. Physical lab exercises needs to be hands-on, of course. We are teaching engineers. They need also to be able to couple up things and understand when they do the wrong thing. But I mean, we need to be flexible. And I think it's important that we also live sort of as close as net zero as we can. In my country, Sweden, we have the opportunity to have most of the energy delivered by fossil-free energy. We have the water, wind, and we have still a bit of nuclear power, so we don't emit too much fossil. So we can say we are living a good life there. It depends a bit on your facilities. So I think it's important that we take these learnings and also try also to teach. I like the comment on broadening the reach. We can reach far beyond the normal student population and far beyond our industry partners. We need to reach also the general public with the lifelong learning experiences on how to behave, to be a good citizen, how to understand the complex systems. And we as a technical university needs to really address the systems approach here, because it's so complex to understand the whole game. So I think we have a lot to do there. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Omaheti?
Yeah, I agree that there's a lot we can do and should do. But let me just mention 5 things that we can do as universities. I think it's important to do as much as possible through our own operations. And sort of rather than relying on carbon offsets or renewable energy purchase, because it's easy to outsource carbon emissions reductions, but universities, in fact, must take ownership of reducing their direct emissions at the same time. Secondly, significant investment is required in energy efficiency retrofits of old buildings for most universities. I mean, most of our universities, we are in old buildings, and we've got to consider making this investment in terms of retrofits of old buildings on our campuses. The third is that we require significant investment in on-site renewables, such as rooftop photovoltaics. Expensive initially, but of course, quite efficient for the sustainable future. And fourthly, a complete commitment is required from the university executive, which includes resourcing of departments and infrastructure to achieve this, as well as support for innovative finance solutions and things such as those. And finally, large-scale buy-in is required from the university community to play their part. I mean, often we think this is an aspect for the academic sector, but I think we need the entire university community. As I always say, from gardeners to cleaners to parents of our students and everyone involved in we've got to get their buy-in to be successful in this regard. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mamaheti. And now Wei Shi.
Thank you, Santa. I have just a few points to add. First of all, just to reiterate the point before, we must take the sustainability in a truly serious manner. We cannot just pick and choose to do parts of it. For example, we can, in Hong Kong's case, as example, Hong Kong doesn't really have any natural resources, so to speak of. Water, electricity, many things come from the other side of the border, from mainland China. So naturally, it is highly desirable to have as many electric cars as possible. So government has been supporting that. What needs to be understood, this is what we've been trying to educate our students as a case study, is while electric car is quite sensible to Hong Kong, how about the production of battery, extraction of all the electrode and the electrolyte and the related materials? What happens after the car is junked? Where will the battery and everything else go? This is one thing that we feel that must be studied in its entirety seriously. Otherwise, we will not be able to address sustainability in a comprehensive manner. The other aspect is, I think the pandemic was mentioned. That is actually a very, very good illustration. With such a global challenge, the responses from the globe has been very inconsistent between developing countries. The support and treatment, as we have all seen, have been so widespread and varied. And if that is the situation, we can only imagine when it comes to sustainability, how can we really come to the table together to have a genuine and agreeable approach, knowing that different countries, regions have had very vastly different pathway in development. Some started much earlier, some much later, some ongoing, some actually to be developed. So I think we need to really appreciate and support each other in the most genuine sense. Otherwise, we will reduce ourselves to nothing but talking and criticizing each other. The last thing I'd like to mention is in our small example, we happen to be developing a new campus in Guangzhou, mainland China, which is actually in physical size, in phase one, comparable to our entire campus here in Hong Kong. So actually we have a very interesting comparative study opportunity. Namely, we are fast developing a campus comparable, virtually identical to our current campus, which we all have agreed, including our sponsor in Guangzhou, that sustainability must be a highest priority. And after having agreed to that, how to pay for it, knowing that there are some extra costs, long-term and short-term, that is being worked on. However, that is actually a smaller challenge in a sense compared to what we are comparing to our Hong Kong campus. Hong Kong campus is pretty new, only 30 years old. We were established in 1991. But still, back then and compared to now, many approach and thinking are quite different. And we are trying to detect water leakage, for example, from the pipe, because in Hong Kong, about almost 20% of the water was lost. And our case may not be as severe, but it's quite close. And we don't necessarily even have the map of all the piping accurately documented, right? So I feel this is one very concrete example that we must address. Namely, it is easier to start something new, but the world has been in existence for so long, and we must make sense and address it in very concrete terms. so we can be grounded and to make true progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wei Shi. And I'll just highlight two examples at UBC. One has to do with, as many of you mentioned, our encouragement of all members of our community to move away from fossil fuel-powered vehicles to electric vehicles, as well as moving towards mass transit. One of our most exciting initiatives is a solar-powered parkade, which will be used to hopefully charge all of the electric vehicles while faculty and staff and students are at work, and certainly to encourage investment in mass transit locally. The other has to do, as I've mentioned in my video, on the campus as a living lab model with a biomass energy facility that powers much of the campus. And so those are two examples of what we need to really amplify in the years ahead to reach net zero. The second question has to do with how do you think that higher education funding models need to change to support our work? I'll start with William.
There for a minute. So I think one of the at UNAM we started with a sustainability graduate program that is multidisciplinary in that it involves everything from architecture to renewable energies. And the idea behind this is a little bit of what I mentioned earlier in terms of providing a problem-based platform to address some of these problems. A second issue, which I think is vital for any of this to have an impact, is to relate it to the national or federal agenda in terms of funding for research. And that needs to be articulated with whatever government policies are being implemented in order to have an impact in society. And here, I think there is a risk and a set of problems between in the relationship between academia and governments and power, if you will, particularly in less established democracies and even in well-established ones, because the information and the solutions platform is not being listened to or taken seriously by the executive actors at the national level. And I think this is a problem that was already alluded by our colleague from Cape Town in terms of the impacts of a lot of this in terms of energy and climate change and societal impacts is disproportionately geared towards less developed countries in many ways. And if this structural issue is not addressed, then I think whatever we do is going to have a reduced impact to some degree. And we cannot dissociate that from how we present the programs in our university communities and to students to be able to go out and have these studies, baselines, technological proposals have some sort of impact in terms of policy setting or technology transfer to government or to industry. It just can't be dissociated one from the other. So I wanted to put this on the table because I think it's a highly non-trivial issue, but which needs to be addressed in order for any of the technical stuff to have to be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Michael?
I think it's a quite difficult question to address, since the five of us here have probably different funding systems on a quite different scale. So rather than answering that question, I think that we have base funding. We have also national funding institutes, of course, and I guess that we are already on the way there to promote research that has a clear impact. But I would also like to say I think that we are tending to discuss climate very much, the net zero climate. I think sustainable.
We'll go to Momohete.
Thank you very much, Santa. I mean, I agree that this is not an easy question. And I think, in my view, the difficulty of this question is not, of course, it has to do with our different funding structures in each country, but it also has to do with the fact that there are so many needs in universities, and all of them require funding, and all of them are important. So if we want to consider these funding models, we're going to have an integrated but deliberate approach towards finding a net zero carbon pathway. And perhaps at some stage I mean, my hope is that we get to a point where there's recognition of what universities are doing to contribute to net zero transition, and in a way that there can be incentives, but a way that recognizes where we start and resources that what we use with the limited resources that we have. I mean, at the moment, we compete for funding, we get judged in the same way on the same stage, with coming from different bases, both in terms of funding, but also in terms of government, the amount of funding, but also in terms of how government funds universities. So my hope is that in the future, there's a way in which those universities that are doing as much as they can, despite the condition of their context, there can be some recognition of that, so that we can encourage more participation and contribution in this regard. But I also think that there's a need for long-term funding plans to be prepared for infrastructure development that will need to take place over the next 5 to 10 years, or even longer, depending on the university's target dates for achieving net zero carbon. Infrastructure requests also must be integrated into existing real estate processes to leverage existing momentum and processes that's large capital funding asks. And then we need funding models. I mean, the funding models could also ring fence savings generated from utility cost savings to contribute to the net zero pathway plans. Funding models may also need to acknowledge the urgency of climate change as an existential threat and not put off funding, even if it means loaning money to pay for a better future that will also see a good financial return from these investments. I think this is a tough one, but I really think we need to be a little more creative in this conversation, and not leave it to countries, but also take it to funding agencies, because we know many of for us in developing countries, many of our research work is funded from outside our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Momohete. So back to Michael. We got cut off.
Thanks. I'm not sure what happened, but I got thrown out. So I hope I didn't started something controversial. I was saying that I think sustainable development is so much more than just climate. I think we should be concerned with so much more, and I think we have a duty also to, in the way we discuss sustainable development, so it doesn't polarize everyone, because we have seen so much polarization between climate activists or climate deniers and so on. So we need to bring this together, because it's too important to have this polarization. We need to understand that everything we do matters. we need to say that we are not just having renewable energy, but it's so much focus also on how we use that energy in efficient system, power grids. We heard from Hong Kong about the power grids and so on. We can do so much, and all the emissions, not just carbon dioxide, is so important to take a grip on. So I think that is important, and we need to discuss this in a greater context. So I mean, we have pure scientists doing physics or whatever, but they need to be able to discuss their science in the context of sustainable development. I think we have much to learn there, but that is the way forward, as I see it. So it's difficult to say a funding model for each and every one of our universities, but we need to think in these terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Wei-Shi.
To me, if we seek special category of funding, no matter how generous government is going to be, it's not going to be enough. You can never solve problem like what we are discussing with special funding. So I would say we must internalize and give the priority to this matter. And we actually have been discussing here, trying to link up consistently and comprehensively whatever we do with sustainability as one of the key attributes. So even though the funding may come from very generic sources, we feel that we need to alert, sensitize, and even ask the question that in the context of sustainability, for example, if you feel you have nothing to do with it, we'd like to have a maybe conversation. And many science and engineering and business related topics certainly have implications. And we'd like to give this topic the due priority. Obviously, the government here in Hong Kong is quite mindful and quite willing to fund it. Okay, it's not that they are incentive, they are. Hong Kong has pledged 2015 to be the carbon neutral target date. Mainland China in a different development curve, 2060. So we are seeing some differences, but it is one thing to declare that as a target date. What does it mean in the true sense? How are we going to get there? We must work together with the government, because government alone cannot do this. We all know that. So university must show up at the table, but we also need to put our act together. For example, we have been soliciting and receiving donation in substantial amount sum. And we have been pitching to the donors along this direction, namely to support campus-wide, especially student learning, research, and translational efforts to address this issue. And even for our own endowment, we have been discussing now, how do we take, I'm sure this is nothing unique to Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. ESG must be part of the consideration when we consider the investment strategy, right? So I think all these are very relevant because they, one way or the other, generate the resources we need to do the job we must carry out. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei-Shi. Well, we only have questions for time for just some closing comments. Let me just end with a couple of things about what we're doing at UBC. First, I believe that there needs to be many more incentives globally with respect to new build and sustainable built environment. In most nations, the research funding for sustainable solutions on campuses is not yet adequate to really help resource us to get to net zero. We have, as university, as you know, committed to net zero by 2035, which is a 15-year acceleration of our previous target. And we will have to resource much of that internally as an institution, but we certainly will require funding nationally. And it's going to require, I think, a much better partnership between academia, government, and industry. Right now, things are much too fragmented, at least in Canada. Although we're very proud of what we're doing, I think that most nations, most institutions would agree that things are too fragmented, and that has to stop as a matter of urgency. And finally, to Momohiti's comments, we really have to seriously, globally, come together and think about how to resource each other and this global effort. And there needs to be a much larger global resource. Just as there has been for fighting the pandemic, there has to be that kind of global commitment to resource activities around the globe. A hemispheric approach will be inadequate. There really needs to be a transition with urgency to supporting each other globally. And so I think we just have enough time for just about a minute each for you to talk with some closing comments about the takeaway you'd like to leave from your institution to this COP26 conference and this particular event. William?
Thank you, Santa. So I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that were mentioned right now. I think it was Wei who mentioned that we need to internalize the problem. And I take that as to mean that we have to internalize it to the academic community. I mean, how is it that we work as academics, right? We do our work, we do our research, and then we get evaluated for whatever comes up, the next funding cycle, the next project, the next promotion, whatever, getting your lab going, etc. And so if we don't shift the goal in terms of the evaluation that is being performed for a person, for a lab, or for an institution, I think it's very difficult that any of this will change. And let me give you an example. I mean, in Mexico, 30 years ago, we have a thing called the National System of Researchers, which is sort of a roster of the people doing research in public institutions in Mexico. Very little, a very small fraction of this personnel is in private institutions. So some are, but and 30 years ago, this was like 5,000 people. Okay, and today it's like 35,000 people. So you can multiply by some factor if you want to take into account people who do research-related activities in industry and so on. But it's of order, it was a few thousand and now it's a few tens of thousands. And so the rules that were set in place 30 years ago for evaluation for individuals were geared towards making people produce and publish and direct thesis and supervise students so that the community would grow. And this was a very individual-centered evaluation. And this was successful in a way because it did allow the community to grow in various disciplines, biological sciences, physical sciences, etc. But it won't work if you scale it up by an order of magnitude for the same purposes, and even less for different purposes. So I think we need to refocus that. And that means that people doing the evaluations, which are typically people who've been doing research for at least 20 years, have to change this chip. And if we don't do that, then this is going to take a very long time to happen. Because the young are very much geared towards this, but they're being evaluated by a different generation of people who are used to something different. And this requires sort of a phase shift if we want this to happen in a time scale that is shorter than a generation, which is what we need to do because 2030 is around the corner. It's not 30 years away. So that's at the community level. And then the second thing is what Santa just said. I mean, the science community globally works by international peer evaluation. So we need to use this to our advantage and exert international peer pressure at the government level. Many governments are not taking this seriously, and even less so when it only comes from their local or national institution. If it comes from a multinational body, pressure is different. And this is the value of something like what is happening in Glasgow right now. And we need to, take a fuller advantage of that in order to have a better impact on a shorter time scale. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I've actually been told generously that we have another 30 minutes. So just take a little bit more time. And we also
That's why I went a little bit over.
We have a few more. We can answer a few more questions as a panel. So please do not rush, Michael.
Okay, then I take my 10 minutes then. Seriously, I think work internationally, work cross-disciplinary, and use the fact that people learn from being at various places, like having person mobility. And what we have done in my university, KTH, is that we have a strategic partnership with 15 external organizations. I think we have 9 export companies. We have 2 public partners, which is City of Stockholm and the Region of Stockholm Research Institutes. I think our mission with the university is not just bilateral, but to work with all these partners where we put the sustainable development at the forefront, and we meet together, every one of us, a couple of times per year to discuss these matters. I think for me, being within the EU, it's natural that we work together with the companies and other organizations to get the new funding opportunities with the Horizon Europe program. I think if we cannot address that in the terms of sustainable development, it's a big failure, but I'm confident that we will succeed in doing that. So I think I just prepared for the short ones. I can come back if time allows, but I think these things are very important. And maybe it's just me and my university, but I think sometimes we believe so much in ourselves and don't listen too much from the outside. I think we should be humble and really understand that both the public sector and the companies around us have things to teach us at the university level. Absolutely. So I can stop there.
Thank you. Omohete?
Thanks, Santa. I agree with colleagues on the points that they've made. I just want to add that I think we need to raise the flag more about the agency of climate sustainability or climate change. I think, and I often think that there are voices that get heard, and I think young people's voices are very powerful, but you need those voices united. And I think drawing the connection between poverty and inequality that we face in the world and how it's related to climate change, that the fact that it is those people who will suffer the most, I think it is very important, because I think when we show this link between poverty and climate change, I think you will get more of a buy-in from our young people. And I find that most of the time when you have a united voice like that, irrespective of whether it's a developed or developing country, and where young people don't necessarily point fingers at one another, it is much more powerful. I mean, and we saw how powerful that was with the Roads Must Fall movement. A movement that starts here in Cape Town and travels around the world and reaches Oxford, reaches Bristol, reaches Yale, with the same intensity, captures the imagination of the world in that way. Whether the road statues fell or not in all campuses, that's irrelevant. The point is that movement kept everyone, because you had young people from a developing country raising their voice, connecting with others elsewhere who have the same history in their city of slavery, and asking questions about that history, captured by that, using the same slogan, same energy to raise their voice in that regard, and then it gets attention and it gets support from across the world. I would like to see that kind of agency. I know that there are voices that are coming up that have been of young people that have been raised about climate change. My only worry is that they are from only one part of the world, and so they are seen as middle class. These are seen as middle class concerns, and I think it's important, more important, that the climate emergency is more and more seen as a concern for working class people, for poor people, and for the working class and the poor to own it, because it is only when the working class and the poor owns it that it will happen. As long as working class and poor people see it as a middle class concern, then we lose out on a whole lot of not only people and parts of the world, but actually the struggle loses credibility, if you like, genuine as it is. Then you have climate change denialists winning those people onto their side because it's an agenda, it's something that works for that agenda. So, and the way we can do that, it's like if oftentimes students say, but ma'am, don't tell me about that. My parents are lying hungry. I need to finish my course. I need someone to pay my fee so that I finish this year and go graduate and work for my family. I'll fight climate change once I get a salary. And somehow I wish I could do away with the student debt and say to them, all that is done now, let's focus on this, because they think it's a trade-off. But somehow I think we need credibility. And when young people raise their voices, when young people from developing countries, from poor countries raise their voices, no leader in the world can ignore that. This is an emergency, and it brings all of our concerns together. Thanks, Santa.
Thank you, Momohete. And I wanted to say, I don't know if you've noticed, but you and I are on the same panels over and over
Yes.
again. And I'm very happy about that. And hopefully we can talk about how we can bring our students together to work collaboratively. And I should also say, you and I are both on the U7 Plus
Yes.
consortium, which began with so much promise in France with the patronage of President Macron. But you're absolutely right. Everything that you say is absolutely on point, that we have to make sure that our students continue to be the catalysts they have been thus far. And as you and I have discussed in a previous setting, I believe it's important also locally within our institutions for them to have a seat at the table. They shouldn't simply be coming outside with signs and trying to encourage us to take action. They should be our partners at the table. And the more we embrace that, the more rapidly I think we can progress. So thank you, Momohete. Wei Shi.
First of all, I feel quite encouraged that we certainly all share similar kind of serious concern. I also feel that we are just at the very beginning of this journey. Each of us have been trying to do certain things, but I trust that we all agree much more need to be done further. So one thing to follow up what you have just said, since just take 5 of us, for example, we are in very different parts of the world. It is very important for us to foster genuine and the true collaboration and exchange of the views between our students and our faculty and staff. Because socio-economic development, political constraints, and the awareness very still very substantially. And it is only going to work if members from different parts of the world can have a better appreciation and insight into each other. So this is one thing I just feel it must be stressed again and again. The second point is we need to promote more of evidence-based and system-wide thinking, because matters are not one-dimensional. It is very complicated, to say the least. So we cannot let the ideological or political view dominate, overwhelm us. Otherwise, we cannot possibly be successful. The last thing is about the young people. I fully agree that we must offer more than just a seat at the table. They, in many ways, are the soul and energy of this whole movement. However, what we, especially as university educators, must do is to help them develop a framework which can truly solve the problem more than being agitated and frustrated. Okay, it is understandable fully, we were all young ones, that at that age, you have a lot of idealism and you really cannot wait to see the world turn better. It is unfortunate and it's also real that we must solve the problem in concrete steps. Otherwise, we continue even to polarize ourselves. That would be very, very sad. So these are the points I feel that I have learned more tonight, and certainly I hope we will have a chance to sit down to talk more in person, more than just over the video conferencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei-Shi. But certainly this Zoom or virtual format contributes to our mission for a sustainable planet. And so some combination or hybrid approach is probably good. Let me just move to one more question. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, one thing that we haven't mentioned too much is innovation. And I think we are talking about the idealism, and I think we don't have to just rely on that. I think there is plenty of capital out there, venture capital that just wants to invest in sort of sustainable development projects. And I think we, at least I think all of our 5 universities are having quite sort of sophisticated innovation offices that helps out there. And I just think that we have to mention that innovation is the new area where you will see the investments coming along. So whether you're idealist or you just want to do something that you can make money on, or whatever your driving force is, innovation in sustainable development is really the way forward. And I think we should also announce that here, that we are promoting innovations in clean tech, in climate initiatives, and whatever it is. So that's something I missed from the conversation so far.
Thank you, Michael. I'm excited to say we have a question from those who are listening. And the question is, how can we create more neutral platforms to talk about solutions towards the net zero transition? So that really highlights one of the themes of what we've been talking about. And I'd like to open it up to the panelists to respond. I'll start once again. We'll go in the reverse order this time with Wei-Shi. How can we create these neutral platforms?
I think first of all, we just got to be inclusive, to let regions of different stage of development participate fully, and we must listen to each other. And hopefully, but it's very critical in that sense that we need to adapt and address solution with clear, I think the innovation was just mentioned, that certainly is a very important aspect. And we need to find solution based on the local situation. No matter how innovative we are, solutions will have to be adapted based on local condition. So that is one thing I feel we must address by considering the difference while advocating the common goal. That is the most one, in my view, one of the most difficult part, because we are all conditioned by where we are, and to see where we are not, while others are. That is the most essential part of this mission, I feel. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let me just chime in very quickly to say that each of us are on different hemispheric or regional networks, and those are powerful. But we have a responsibility within those organizations to encourage those networks to share globally. If you think about the G7 Plus, it was founded with a bias towards G7 nations. And so for those of us who are on it, those of us that insisted that there be a plus component beyond the G7 nations, have to make sure that that's truly a neutral platform. That, for example, one requirement cannot be that the meetings are always held in G7 nations. So we have a responsibility as members of these very powerful and potentially useful networks to make sure that, of course, we have to solve problems at our institutions and regionally and within hemispheres, but to really push within those organizations for a truly neutral platform, for them to be hosts for that. It includes, for example, Weishi, the APRU, Association of Pacific Rim Universities. It's really hemispheric around the Pacific Rim. But we can't be myopic in what we do, and we must reach out and include other institutions and nations to make sure that they are truly neutral platforms. Mahiti.
Thanks, Santa. I mean, when you said neutral platforms, I wondered what makes them neutral. Is it political neutrality? Is it geographical? Is it ideas neutrality? What is it? And I'm asking this because and of course it made me think about where all the conversations that we have about net zero transition, where do we have them? And they are normally held in comfortable places that are not ones that are homes to what I would call climate change. And I wonder whether a neutral platform is a platform, could be a platform where just even as we have these conversations, we see the deterioration of the world, we feel it, and so we feel we can be pushed more into urgency, the urgency that ensures that we don't just look at our own countries only. We realize that this is a problem for us all, that we may be focusing only on our country, on our context, on our university, but actually it's worldwide. And what you are experiencing at that time during the conversation or the conference, it's a matter of time before it gets to everyone else, and all of us get, prompted to do something. And it might sound ridiculous, but I part of me says the neutrality is wonderful to wish for, but actually it is a luxury. And so I long for a context where these things are discussed that will make us uncomfortable, that can drive us into a space of discomfort, that we get out of our own thinking only about our own context, that we start thinking about the world as a whole, that we have to do something and come together to do something, even if it's not it's not for my country or my institution. But we see that we've got to do something because we are in a place. And, it's a crazy idea, but I think we've got to think about that and not go to a comfortable place. There we are.
Mama Hete, I say I can't answer the question about what is meant by neutral because the question didn't come from me. But I'm assuming that it has multiple meanings, that it has to do with geophysical locations and neutrality there. And to your point, when you talk about at your own institution, it needs to include all the workers as well. Neutrality so that the conversation is not only amongst administrators and deans or prominent faculty, but it's inclusive. So perhaps we could substitute the word neutrality to inclusiveness. But I like your comment that we have to be uncomfortable as well. But I can't answer the question as to what is meant by neutrality. But I think lots of things were. Yeah.
I appreciate what you said, and I think I agree with the inclusivity. Yes. And often we include all the voices and people from different places. And so I'm thinking, can we all together in that inclusive space get to experience the same kind of discomfort? Would that drive us to be inclusive in what we decide to do from then on, or even start at that space? Because we will all feel the pressure of climate change together at the same time. Will it prompt us to be more drastic, more bold in what we decide to do, and also what we decide to support? Because that's my point. But I hear what you.
I just add that I think certainly inclusiveness and the setting and some realization of the discomfort, these are important. In my view, the neutrality comes from a very simple and important consideration, namely all different angles of the proposition should be given and allowed to be presented. It's not neutral in the sense of anything else. It's just that's what the inclusiveness meant when we exchanged earlier. So we cannot be neutral for the sake of being artificially neutral. It's just by allowing and in fact encouraging the viewpoint to be expressed freely, so we can at the end consider a holistic and balanced outcome. Okay, that's my interpretation.
Yes, William.
Thank you. So I had a little bit of the same reaction as Margrethe expressed in terms of what the question meant, and I'm sure the person who presented the question had a specific meaning for neutral, but there are many of them. It's a slippery concept, and I agree with Margrethe. I like her answer. The comfort zone is a terrible thing, right? And given the state of urgency that all of this represents, the more clear this can be to everyone, I think the better the solutions, and particularly the shorter the timescale in which we can take action on them. Neutral, part of the meaning which I take is that a lot of the solutions and the problems are currently immediately politicized, and that makes it very difficult to make progress. And one way in which this may be mitigated or avoided is, as has already been mentioned, to listen and to be inclusive from the very start, not come to a problem or a forum with a preconceived solution, but rather talk to the people who are feeling the impacts directly and listen first, rather than propose something from wherever lab or institution or we are coming from. I think listen first is a concept that is useful in many settings, and in this setting particularly, it's vital, because otherwise it becomes a yes or no, black and white from the very start, before you've even started talking about the problem. And then, the example of wearing or not wearing masks over the past 2 years is just dumbfounding to me. I just can't get my head around it in terms of how this has become a political issue. When it didn't used to be, and it hasn't been for very similar illnesses in the past, over the past 20 years. And all of a sudden it was. How do we get to this point? And when you get to that point, it's very difficult to climb down from that once it's set in people's minds. So it has to be addressed from the start. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Let me just chime in real quickly. I know, Michael, I'd like to get to you, but I just want to, before I lose the train of thought, talk about two things in terms of neutrality and listening first. Thank you for that, William. Here in Vancouver, as you know, we're fortunate as an institution to be located on the unceded traditional ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. And so we, in terms of sustainability and climate action, I can tell you there's so much we can learn from their millennia of experience. There are many things, if we had listened at the beginning, we wouldn't be in the predicament we are today. The progress and modernization that has followed colonialization is really at the root cause of many of our problems. And so listening absolutely is key. The second thing I'd like to say is I was just at the Banff Forum, and it was a wonderful, the 20th anniversary of the forum, and there were politicians, there were CEOs of companies, there were academics, there were a few activists, mainly older activists, talking about the climate crisis. But in terms of making sure that all voices are heard, at the very end, a youthful participant said, you know, the problem with this is it's the same old, same old. It's the same people who are speaking, who have relevant things to say, but the problem here is who is missing. And those are the young activists that need to have more than, as was said, a seat at the table. So perhaps all of that has to do with neutrality as well. And it does also, there was someone from an extractive industry, from Shell, who said, I think appropriately, that they need to be part of the solution because of the technology that they can bring to the table. So instead of viewing them as the problem, and that they need to be part of the solution as well. So all of those, I think, have to do with the concept of neutrality and inclusiveness. Michael.
Of course, I agree with all of what you said, and especially what William said about the chance of everyone getting heard in the discussions. And that is actually our duties as universities, to bring the discussion to a concrete stage and not have a prejudice towards this and that. We need to have scientific discussions, and we need to also have the discomfort, but we also need to implement some hope in the way forward. And sometimes these polarized discussions are not giving any hope. It's just going down the hill very fast, like a downhill skier. And I'm sure I'm a technology optimist. So of course we will find a lot of solutions, but we are never discussing how do we do that. We are just saying, okay, let's go fossil free, let's go electric cars, let's do this and that. But the way to do all that is a very slippery way. We don't exactly know, and the population have no clue on what is expected from each and every one of us. So I think discomfort, yes, but hope, big yes. We need to inject that into the whole discussion. I think that is part of what is said with the neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's a perfect timing. And certainly universities have to be about hope, but also have to be key players in the move towards net zero. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Tim Bedford.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really interesting panel discussion. It was great to be listening in. I'm delighted to say that, of course, we're now able to launch this thing. It's our call to action. This is the call to action that's been agreed by the different participating organizations in this symposium on science for net zero. We're going to be going to the break now, but we'll give you a link there in order to be able to read through the call to action, and we hope you'll be as excited about it as we are. This will be a major topic of discussion in the final session, so don't go away. We'll be back with the final session at the top of the hour. Okay, so see you soon.